In fact, the knuckle of my thumb is sort of sticking out just a little bit because indeed there's something that looks like a knuckle on this gyrus called the uncus. The parahippocampal gyrus folds in upon itself to form a really wonderful structure in the brain called the hippocampus. And we'll see that in cross-sections through the brain. So 5 fingers on 5 gyri in the temporal lobe. And now to complete our lesson on placing fingers on the gyri of the cerebral hemispheres, I've got yet a third specimen that allows me to work on the medial surface of the hemisphere. But to approach the medial surface, I want to begin again with the central sulcus. And you'll recall that I defined the central sulcus with 2 fingers on the lateral surface with the precentral gyrus, a postcentral gyrus, and the space between my fingers being conceptualized as the central sulcus. Now what I want to do is I want to reverse my approach to the central sulcus and let my fingertips wrap along the dorsal surface of the brain such that my fingertips come together in the part of the brain called the paracentral lobule. So now imagine that my 2 fingers are fused together. That's the relation of the pre and the postcentral gyri to the paracentral lobule. So that portion contributed now by my middle finger is the precentral gyrus, and the part contributed by my index finger is the postcentral gyrus. And again, those 2 fingertips or 2 gyri will fuse just above and in front of the branches of the cingulate sulcus. Now the rest of the frontal lobe can be conceptualized as having 2 long gyri. The cingulate gyrus that runs right on top of the corpus callosum, and then the gyrus that forms the dorsal margin of the hemisphere. This is simply the continuation of the superior frontal gyrus onto the medial face of the hemisphere. Now let's look at the occipital lobe. The occipital lobe is in this region of the brain, and it can be conceptualized as having 2 gyri that are somewhat parallel to each other. The inferior of the 2 is called the lingual gyrus, and this is a gyrus that forms something like a tongue shape on the bottom of the occipital lobe. Lingual means tongue. And then just above the lingual gyrus is a wedge-shaped structure called the cuneus gyrus. Cuneus is a Latin word that means wedge. Now just in front of the wedge is a gyrus that wraps around from the superior parietal lobule, and this we call the precuneus, which of course would simply mean in front of the wedge. So the rest of the medial face then is comprised of an occipital lobe defined by 2 gyri, a lingual gyrus and a cuneus gyrus, with a space between them being the calcarine sulcus. And then at about a right angle is the precuneus gyrus, with the space between the precuneus gyrus and my 2 fingertips, representing the occipital lobe, is a long straight sulcus called the parietal occipital sulcus. Now you may not have a human brain to wrap around your fingers, but if you're fortunate enough to have access to a brain model, I would encourage you to do this exercise. Perhaps you can even make your own brain model out of modeling clay, or perhaps even just with a round-shaped balloon that you can mark up and put your own fingers on the gyri to help conceptualize the complex anatomy of the cerebral hemispheres.